I want to begin with a little bit of a disclaimer to say that talking about non-duality is extremely challenging, in part because our language is inherently dualistic. And I'll say more about that in a moment. And because the state of oneness, and it's not really a state, there right there is a language problem, but the state of oneness is beyond conceptualization, it's beyond description. So in the same way that, the Tao that can be spoken, the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. So it's hard to talk about non-duality in a way that, is helpful. So I'm just going to say a few things and bring in some of the teachings that I've been working with recently of Nisargadatta and the French Advaita teacher Jean Klein. Some of you may know these teachers, and share some of their wisdom about non-duality. So I chose this topic in part because I think we're all feeling the pain and anxiety of separation really strongly right now. I mean, we always feel it to one degree or another, but I think it's especially strongly in the field at this particular moment, this particular historical moment. The climate catastrophe, the sense of political divisiveness, the wars in Gaza and the Ukraine, and you could add to that list, indefinitely. But all these things reveal just how destructive the sense of separation can be when taken to its utmost extremes. And I think we're also more and more longing for a sense of connection to something greater than egoic satisfactions or the material rewards that we've been told will make us happy, but clearly don't. There's a kind of loneliness in our culture, a sense of being separate, of being cut off from community that's really striking. I came across a statement by the Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, who May of last year, said that the United States is suffering from an epidemic of loneliness. And apparently half of Americans self-report feeling extremely lonely. And Murthy went on to say that this sense of loneliness and social isolation is as damaging to our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I'm not sure how they arrive at that kind of statistic, but it's not just sad. It's really harmful to our health to not feel connected, to feel rather disconnected. So this story of separation, the story that tells us we're separate from the earth, that we're fundamentally different from and superior to all other life forms, that the mind is separate from the body, that life is just a mechanical fulfillment of these meaningless physical laws. This story of separation is taking us literally to a dead end. And I think more and more we're seeing that this story is collapsing. It's unsustainable. We can't live individually or as a culture collectively in this story any longer. I think it's the false assumptions that it's based on are becoming glaringly apparent. So the topic of non-separation feels especially relevant right now. I think it's really up for us. I think working with non-duality in meditation, and by looking at these poems, all of which are about boundary dissolving experiences, that these can help us, strengthen the aspiration to wake up from the nightmare of modernity, the crushing sense of separation, the illusion of separation. So we're all seemingly stuck in the world of form, and the world of form is the world of separation. So our senses, our language, our bodies, our beliefs, our culture all tell us that we are separate beings living in a world of other separate beings. Our bodies seem to have definite boundaries that separate us from our environments. And our environment itself is sectioned off, fenced off into discrete spaces. And these spaces are all owned by someone. I read somewhere recently that there's almost no space in the United States that isn't owned by someone, which is rather striking when you think about it. Like everything is owned. Everything is separated out and belongs to someone and not to anyone else. And in this respect, I want to share a haiku. I shared it with Chloe before the meeting began. It's in the new anthology that's coming out in September, The Poetry of Grief, Gratitude, and Reverence. It's by a poet named John Wills, and the haiku is, "Keep out sign, but the violets keep on going. Keep out sign, but the violets keep on going." I find that just a delightful, kind of pith teaching about separation and non-separation. The human impulse to separate out and to fence off, and then the violets, this irrepressible life force, ignores the sign and trespasses. Our language also is, as I said before, inherently dualistic because of the structure of our grammar. The subject, verb, object structure of our grammar tells us that we are, separate being in here looking out at a world out there of separate objects that is not us. And then finally, our culture and the way it fetishizes individuality, it further ensures that we see ourselves as separate, and that we not only see that, but we actually cling to and cherish our separation, our individuality, our sense of being different. That's something that we actually feel is quite important, even as we come to recognize the loneliness that it causes, more than the freedom it seems to promise. So all those things reinforce the illusion of separation and make it really hard, even if we understand intellectually that we're not separate. Our daily lives are structured by these different ways of ensuring that we feel separate from the world around us. And one way we might see this sense of separation, one way we might understand it, is as a case of mistaken identity. That is, we think we are our bodies, our thoughts, our emotions, our memories, our jobs, our particular talents, our race, our nationality. We might think that that's who we are, but that is a fundamental mistake. The great Advaita teacher Nisargadatta said, "See that you are not what you believe yourself to be. Fight with all the strength at your disposal against the idea that you are nameable and describable. You are not. Refuse to think of yourself in terms of this or that. You are not even a human being. You just are, a point of pure awareness coextensive with time and space and beyond both. You are not even a human being. You just are. A point of pure awareness, coextensive with time and space and beyond both. A good friend of mine recently had a granddaughter, and we were exchanging texts right after her birth. You know, I was asking him how things were going, and he was giving me these updates. And right after she was born, he said, you know, they haven't weighed her yet. So at this point, she's nameless and weightless. And I remember thinking, she's pure being, you know, for this short time, nameless and weightless. It was wonderful. But then, of course, as we grow and become adults, all these identities get layered on top of that pure being, so that, you know, I'm an American, I'm a poet, I'm a teacher, I'm a man, I'm a white person, I'm an old person, I'm an old white man, old straight white man, you know, the pinnacle of all creation. And that reinforces this false sense of who we truly are. So we lose the absolute sense of pure being, pure awareness. We have glimpses of it at times, especially if we practice, if we meditate, if we engage in the Dharma teachings. But still, we're so conditioned to see ourselves in these relative terms rather than the ultimate sense of who we are. This spacious, empty, pure awareness. So Nisargadatta is, you know, you just are a point of pure awareness, but Nisargadatta is a fully awakened being. And I think it's safe to say for most of us, we don't live our daily lives from that sense of pure awareness, pure being. But we get glimpses, I think, you know, in meditation, in lovemaking, in, you know, when we experience a flow state, when we're totally immersed and engaged in some activity that helps us to forget ourselves, that can give us a sense of that pure awareness. But also just in moments of quiet peace that come unbidden, just all of a sudden, for no particular reason, you feel this sense of peace and contentment. Nothing is needed, nothing is lacking. Everything is just fine, just as it is. I mean, it's grace when that comes. But it's a sign, it's a reminder of who we are, these moments. And in moments of wonder and astonishment, I think when we are taken by something that inspires a feeling of awe or reverence in us, that too reminds us of our true nature, of who we really are beyond these layers of identities that we have assumed. And also in our experience of works of art, they can take us to this place as well. And the French Advaita teacher Jean Klein said, when a work of art causes an inner resonance, the personality disappears, the ego vanishes, and one becomes, for one moment, the very expression of unity. When a work of art causes an inner resonance, the personality disappears, that is, we might say the false self disappears, the ego vanishes, and one becomes, for one moment, the very expression of unity. And I hope that we may get a taste of this when we talk about the poems together, when we immerse ourselves in these poems in the way that I like to engage with them, which is this appreciative way rather than interpretive way. And I'll say more about that as well. But to do that, to have that deep inner resonance with a work of art that Jean Klein talks about, we have to first dissolve the boundary that separates us from the poem. The boundary where, or the sense of separation where we hold the poem up at arm's length and we interpret it, we analyze it, we make statements about it. When we can step away from that and actually enter the poem and experience it from the inside and experience it with a sense of appreciation and mindfulness rather than interpretation and analysis, that can, I think, inspire this sense of the ego vanishing, the personality disappearing. So I hope we'll get a taste of that. I'm seeing a message here. A participant has closed captioning. Who can see the transcript of this meeting? Do you want to answer that, Chloe? Or I think it's just, well, I'm not sure who can see the transcript of this meeting. But
yeah, I think that message everyone's getting, you can just click OK.
Okay. All right. So these glimpses of our true nature, of non-duality, often come in the gaps between thoughts, in these kind of momentary breaks in the mind's, kind of relentless proliferation of thought. A sacred pause, we might say. And if we pay attention to these gaps, if we turn towards them and actually enter them, we begin to see that there's another reality beyond our daily egoic, fears and desires. And Jean Klein said, if from time to time we experience moments of stillness and deep attention, turn toward these gaps of nothingness, little by little, the emptiness will reveal itself as being full, and finally as supreme plenitude. If from time to time we experience moments of stillness and deep attention, turn towards these gaps of nothingness, little by little, the emptiness will reveal itself as being full, and finally as supreme plenitude. The subject-object dichotomy falls away, and there's a sense of absolute fullness, abundance. But it's an inversion of the way we usually think. We think, oh, the gaps between things are just meaningless. It's the things themselves, it's the thoughts that are important, not the space between them. And one of the practices we do on retreat is we'll ask participants to walk outside and look not at the trees, typically in a forested area, but the spaces between them. And it has the remarkable effect of engendering a spaciousness in the mind. But we are so conditioned to look at things and to give such significance to our thoughts, when we start to shift and look at the spaces between them, something new can enter. And just as we're confused about who we really are, we're also confused about what constitutes plenitude or abundance. And I want to share an anecdote. Some journalists visited a monastery, and after seeing how the monks lived their daily lives, the journalists asked them, like, how can you live in such deprivation? There's not a lot to do. It's not a very exciting life, very few pleasures and comforts and so on. And the monk's reply was, it's not we who are deprived, it's you. We're not suffering deprivation. Our lives are full. Our lives are rich. It's you in the way you live in distraction and noise and confusion, the ones who are deprived. I thought that was a wonderful teaching. Another example of the fullness of emptiness comes sometimes when people lose their houses in a flood or a fire, earthquake, or some natural disaster. Some people will emerge from that with a sense of incredible lightness and freedom, which seems completely counterintuitive, but it does happen. Of course, not everyone feels that way, but Eckhart Tolle talks about this, and he cites some examples of people are just totally surprised. Like instead of being devastated, they're actually, oh, I'm free. All the things I thought I needed to feel safe, to be happy, are gone, and I'm fine. In fact, I'm freer now than I was then. And I think that also, it's a reminder again of who we really are, and what's important and what's not. So the question becomes, how do we turn towards and experience these gaps, these moments of non-separation, these moments of pure awareness? And of course, I assume you're all, experienced meditators, and that is the primary way, in the Buddhist tradition, that we get close to who we really are, this emptiness in awareness. But the Advaita teachers that I've been reading, primarily Jean Klein and Nisargadatta, but others, Adyashanti and Rupert Spira and others, consistently recommend that we adopt an attitude of detached witnessing, a kind of aloofness towards the changes in the world. And we might confuse this detachment with a kind of coldness. And in fact, in the Nisargadatta's book, I Am That, it's all a dialogue with students. And one student says to him, you are so very indifferent to everything, he says to Nisargadatta. And Nisargadatta replies, I am not indifferent, I am impartial. I give no preferment to the me and the mine. Life and death are all the same to me. And the questioner insists impartiality makes you indifferent. And Nisargadatta replies, on the contrary, compassion and love are my very core. Void of all predilections, I am free to love. And this reminds me a little bit of the Dogen teaching, which you probably know, where he says, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. And to study the self is to forget the self. And to forget the self is to be enlightened by all things. Lots of different translations of that. But that sense of, if we're not attached, if we are free from all predilections, all preferences even, we're free to love all things without attachment, without agendas. If we're not consumed with our egoic fears and desires, if we're not always pursuing our own pleasures and pushing away our discomforts, we can have this experience of being able to love all things without attachment, without desire. So it's just about 11 o'clock, and I would like to do a brief practice with you. I have found that engaging with poetry after a period of meditation, can engender a different and much deeper way of experiencing poems. So I would like to sit with you just for a few minutes in silence. And I assume you're all experienced meditators, so you can just do your usual practice, whatever that might be. But after coming into the body and attuning to the breath and just being here, just pay an extra bit of attention to the gap between breaths. So at the end of the exhalation, before the inhalation begins, just let yourself kind of drop into that empty space, not looking for anything in particular, but just being with that gap and just see how that feels. So, let's just drop into our practice. Let's assume our meditation posture. I sit with my eyes closed, but you're free to, of course, keep them open, whatever practice is comfortable to you. And just coming into the body noticing how it feels just to be sitting here right now. Letting the body relax. You might let the shoulders drop, let the face be soft, the jaw be loose. Maybe feeling your contact with the ground, sense of connection with the earth that supports us. Just feeling the weight and warmth of the body. And feeling the breath. And letting our attention linger in the gaps between breaths. Sliding down the exhalation into this empty space before the next in-breath begins. So staying in your meditation, I'm going to read a poem now, the first poem in the packet I sent you, A Blessing by James Wright. Just off the highway to Rochester, Minnesota, twilight bounds softly forth on the grass, and the eyes of those two Indian ponies darken with kindness. They have come gladly out of the willows to welcome my friend and me. We step over the barbed wire fence into the pasture where they have been grazing all day alone. They ripple tensely. They can hardly contain their happiness that we have come. They bow shyly as wet swans. They love each other. There is no loneliness like theirs. At home once more, they begin munching the young tufts of spring in the darkness. I would like to hold the slenderer one in my arms, for she has walked over to me and nuzzled my left hand. She is black and white. Her mane falls wild on her forehead, and the light breeze moves me to caress her long ear that is delicate as the skin over a girl's wrist. Suddenly, I realize that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. And as you're ready, just bring your meditation to a close. And Chloe, if you could screen share the poem, that would be helpful before we begin responding to it. Thank you. And I think I recognize, I think at least a couple of faces from the last time I met with you, but just a quick word about the way I like to approach poems. And it's by beginning with what we appreciate, just noticing what we like about the poem, what feels especially rich or resonant or kind of lit up, to let go of interpretive thoughts or analytical thoughts or the need to say something smart or interesting, and just say like what we like and see where that takes us. And it might be a word or a line or an image or a metaphor, a rhythm or the voice of the poem, whatever it is, just, note that and share, and then just see what happens. So we take a gentler, more appreciative approach to the poem. So yeah, what do you notice and like about this poem? What feels especially rich? And if you could raise your Zoom hand, that's probably best, but you can also raise your real hand if that is easier for you. I can wait you out. Yeah, just anybody, like a line that you like, a particular word that maybe surprised you, or yes, Sasha, you have to unmute. Oh, here we go.
Hi, okay, sorry, I forgot how to raise my electronic hand.
Oh, no problem.
Okay, thanks. I think that this is really beautiful and moving. But the line that really gets me is this short sentence. Halfway through a line, they love each other.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
like a thing children looking at animals or even their dolls would say to each other. And that just, I don't know, that just brings me to my knees. I think that's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's a wonderful way of responding. It brings me to my knees. I mean, we feel a kind of humility in the face of beauty sometimes. It takes us down out of our egoic way of relating, and it's all of a sudden, I love that, you know. And that's wonderful. That's such a great way to respond to poems, rather than I think it means this. When he says this, I think he's saying this. Like, that way of responding is just so, it misses so much, and there's a place for that. But yeah, that line always surprises me too. They love each other, especially coming in the sequence. They ripple tensely. They can hardly contain their happiness that we have come. They bow shyly as wet swans. They love each other. There is no loneliness like theirs. Like he's feeling in to their state. I mean, he has such an empathic response to them that he can feel what they're feeling. And maybe it's a projection, but maybe not. It's like the Shuangzi poem where he says, I know the joy of fishes in the river through my own joy as I go walking along the same river. You know, it's our capacity to resonate meaningfully with animals, with trees, with non-human beings, which the story of separation tells us is impossible. But we poets have never bought into that lie. and we see ourselves at times like, oh yeah, it is possible to know, to feel what other beings are feeling. We're not cut off. We're not separate. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah. What else? What else do people find particularly engaging about this poem?
Hello, John. I always respond to the last line or the last two lines.
Oh yeah.
That if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom.
Yeah. Oh, it's one of the great endings of American poetry. Yeah. Yeah. But go ahead.
My life partner died in 2013, and we had a 3-day vigil in our living room with an open coffin. And I read this poem in her honor.
Wow.
And so when I come back to this poem and I come to that last line, it literally for me speaks of Monica's love of beauty and stepping out of her body, and she clearly was full in blossom.
Oh, that's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Yeah, poems can help us in those moments, or they can yeah, there can be a kind of comfort and solace that comes from a poem that seems to speak to exactly what we're feeling, or seems to, you know, capture a moment of grief or deep appreciation. But yeah, that ending is so remarkable. Suddenly I realize that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. Yeah, there's so much to admire about that. I have more to say about it, but I don't want to jump in before other people have a chance to speak. So yeah, Barbara. I think you're still mute. Yeah, you're.
Okay, yeah. I had I just had my own display of the poem because you didn't enlarge it, so it's really hard to see the
Yeah,
text.
yeah,
If you can push on the plus button, then it will go.
yeah. Maybe, yeah, Chloe. Maybe
Anyhow, yeah,
enlarge it, and we can
that's
scroll.
it. Yeah, great. Yeah,
How about this?
That's good.
that's good. Yeah. So for me, the line that really stuck in my mind was actually, can you scroll up? So yeah, thank you. So the eyes of those two Indian ponies darken with kindness, two things. One is that it is an oxymoron. It's somehow, to me, darkening eyes with kindness don't go very well. So it stopped my mind, which is very
Yeah.
good for
Yeah.
every human being to do that.
Yes.
But also, I live in the country, and I walk my dogs by a cow pasture, young cow pastures. They are maybe 18 months. They are bred. They are kept there for breeding.
Mhm.
And so at the moment they are enjoying life,
Yeah.
just eating and playing,
Mhm.
enjoying life. And I often look into, they are very curious and they come and look at us, especially the dogs, I think, are more interesting than myself. And and their eyes are so fantastic. Like our ways of thinking of animals is so wrong, and their eyes are so dignified and full of kindness
Yeah.
and curiosity. It's just fantastic. And I'm a poet myself, so I've been thinking about writing something on that. So
Mhm.
after this poem, I thought I'm gonna write my poem about the cows.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's often the way it works for me. I'll read a poem and be inspired by it, and it will kind of open a passageway to something I would like to write about, something maybe I've been thinking about, but not thought of it as a subject for a poem. And suddenly the poem kind of shows like, oh yes, there's something there.
Yeah, like with our rational minds tend to think that, oh, other people will not find it as interesting as I do, so why bother, right?
Well, yeah. But yeah, I that's wonderful. I hope you have a wonderful experience in writing about that.
I
But yeah,
wrote a few haikus on that, but
oh,
not a poem.
oh,
Haikus are easy. They're
well, can you share one?
effortless. Hmm?
Can you share one of your haikus? I mean, do you just know it? Can you just say it out loud or not? You don't have to.
No, I'd have to. I can give me some time and I'll come back and
Okay,
share.
that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, but cows, I grew up in Nebraska, and of course there are lots of cows in Nebraska. And I know what you mean. They also, I mean, you said dignified, um, and there's a warmth and in their presence and playfulness maybe, but also, yeah, a kind of calmness and depth. There's a sort of almost Buddha-like quality in
And
there.
curiosity, very intelligent curiosity. They come and they look so directly at
Right.
us. And there was a progression. At first they were frightened, so their legs were a little bit twitchy, but
Mhm.
then they were coming closer. Finally, they came to my hand and they sniffed my hand. And now they are just galloping to meet us. So it's amazing the relationship that we're building.
Yeah, that's so great. Yeah, that's another aspect of the story of separation is that, we can't know what animals are feeling. We can't communicate with them or with trees. And we're starting to see that, oh, that's a lie. That we are deeply, deeply connected. Yeah, yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah. What else? What else do people enjoy about this poem? Yeah, Carrie.
Thanks. Kind of to that end of separation, there are two lines that really resonated. One was, we step over the barbed wire into the pasture. And it's kind of risk taking. It's not that they're just standing by admiring them from a distance, but barbed wire is messy and prickly. It's hard to get over.
Yeah.
So I admire just that determination to be closer to them and to be in their space. And then the second line, they ripple tensely, they can hardly contain their happiness that we have come. And it just makes me think about my dog who, at the end of the day, when you get home, they're so excited to see you. And it's not just the tail, but the whole body that's wagging
Right.
in their excitement and anticipation.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, thank you. Those are, yeah, that really beautiful responses to the poem. I also think that moment where they step over the barbed wire into the pasture is really important. I mean, they are stepping over the boundary. So there's already a boundary dissolving experience that leads to the stepping out of the body. They step over the fence, and I would step out of my body. But they're, like you said, risky. Yeah, they're trespassing. And, and this is America, so you could get yourself shot for doing that. But yeah, and as you pointed out, it's like the desire to be closer, to connect, to not just stand at a distance and admire, but actually to get close, to have a kind of intimacy with these beings. And then the result of that is just extraordinary. The moment that the poem describes is just so powerful. And then, yeah, the shivering or the rippling, and horses do that. It's so interesting. But of course, dogs do it as well. But yeah, I love the inclusion of that detail in the description of the horse. Yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah. Yeah, what else do? Perhaps there's another comment about the poem that someone would like to share. Yes, Andrea.
Andrea, yes.
course.
Hello, everyone. I'm Andrea from Italy.
Uh-huh.
And I really like the last line too. And, adding to what we have already said, he's writing that if I stepped out of my body, not I step out of my body. And this really struck me because it's something beginning, not something that already happened. And this leaves the opportunity open for the listener to step outside the body too. So yeah, I appreciated that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
That's a great point. I read this poem and even taught it many times before I got the full significance that it's a potentiality. It's not something that he's already done. The realization is that if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. And that's different than saying, suddenly I stepped out of my body and broke into blossom. And I like what you said about, it creates the possibility for the reader to have that experience. It's not just like it's my experience, it's an opening that we also might step through. And yeah, that's a way of really connecting deeply with the poem. Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. Maybe one more comment, if anyone has one, before we move on. We won't be able to talk about all these poems, but I would like to talk about at least a few more of them. And then we can also have some Q&A at the very end if people want that. All right. Let's move on to the next poem, Obad with Sugar Maple by Valencia Robin. Obad with Sugar Maple. When the hard edges of the book that sang me to sleep woke me, I assumed thoughts of all I hadn't accomplished weren't far behind. The people I'd disappointed, the money I hadn't made, the power structure I'd rarely opposed. But instead, I found myself greeted by an almost criminal hope, somehow free of the social order that had shaped my mind, so that by the time the sun peeked in and the huge sugar maple that filled my window spoke, the only thing I questioned was the 40-hour work week, why the French and Italians got 8 weeks vacation. Because it's been what, 1 million years? And yet somehow that maple knew me. We talked and talked until I became birched and oaked, crab-appled and cherried, drunk with all the treeness I'd forgotten. My God, to think I could bud, even blossom. Yeah, so again, just very simply, what do you like about this poem? What lines or images, moments, words? Yeah, or what surprised you? I mean, sitting with the poem in silence is also good. it's, it's not a problem, but it can be fun to also um, give voice to our appreciation. Yeah, Carrie.
I I appreciate the humor in the poem. It's kind of a sly, gently mocking herself and um, the situation that she's found herself in. And I think when we don't take ourselves too seriously, then sometimes we have greater insight and realization. I mean, there's so much more depth and beauty, but that little kind of twinge stuck out to me.
Yeah, yeah, especially reading it after the James Wright poem, which is, you know, very well. I mean, serious. It's not a humor. I mean, there's no moments of humors in that poem, and this one there is, even though the poems are very similar in other ways. Um, but yeah, I like that about the poem as well. You said the way she kind of mocks herself gently, um, when the hard edges of the book that sang me to sleep woke me, I assumed thoughts of all I hadn't accomplished weren't far behind. The people I disappointed, the money I hadn't made, the power structure I'd rarely opposed. And this happens, right? You wake up and immediately your mind just rushes to like all the things you have to do or the things you didn't do right, or your mind is just waiting for you to wake up to unleash this barrage of dissatisfaction, dukkha. Um, but yeah, the lightness of tone is it's kind of charming in the poem, I think. And then when you get to the end, that it kind of rises to the level of deep realization. But it works differently in the right poem in the sense that it's more playful along the way. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, what else? What else do you like about the poem?
I also I respond to the last line. In the sense I have a ritual every morning. I make tea and I go to my window and I recite a poem, The Presence of Trees.
Mm,
And there's a line in the poem, as though the woods were marrow of my bone, as though I myself were a tree.
mm,
And so this, I enjoy when a couple poems link up and kind of
yeah,
reassure each other or reaffirm a certain aspiration or a certain experience
yeah,
of clearly not no separation there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that too, where a poem that you love, you may be known for a long time, and then another poem comes and feels like it dances with that poem or something, or there's a deep sense of resonance. And of course, we're all drinking from the same stream, um, and responding in often very similar ways. But yeah, we talked and talked until I became birched and oaked, crab-appled and cherried, drunk with all the treeness I'd forgotten. I mean, I love that she says that, it's not like she saw the human-like aspects of the tree. She sees the treeness in herself that she had forgotten. I think that's important too. It's not something new that she's learning here. She's remembering what she had forgotten. She's remembering our true nature, the deep connection, the non-separation that we have with all other life forms. And then that kind of astonishment, my God, to think I could bud, even blossom. And again, like the right poem, that's conditional. It's like I could bud, even blossom. It's a potentiality. But yeah, thank you. That ending is really powerful, and I appreciate what you had to say about that. Yeah. Yeah. What else? Anything else that feels particularly striking or surprising? Yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, the last few lines were fantastic for me. Not only her playfulness with words, that was really brilliant,
Right.
but the statement, that maple knew me.
Yeah.
So again, this is non-duality, right? This is interconnectedness. We're
Yeah.
all one. And she mentioned that in whatever way she meant. But I remember myself as a kid, intuitively, I was going to school, crossing through a park. And sometimes our teachers are quite nasty and would do these sudden tests without any warning. And I read it because I didn't prepare that day. And I would stop sometimes whenever I wasn't prepared. I would stop by this Japanese maple, beautiful red-leaved Japanese maple, and I would talk to the tree and ask for help, for support. And I was a kid. I never heard of non-duality.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's amazing that you just intuitively knew
yeah,
to do that.
yeah. I should write that into a poem.
Absolutely. But that's a indication of how deep within us is this sense of connection that we feel. It's in our lineage. It's been banished in a way since the scientific revolution, but for the millions of years before that, um, we were in communication with.
Yeah, it's not just scientific revolution, but also raising people in big cities. They become disconnected with it, right? With the nature. So I was lucky. I grew up near forests and meadows, and my grandma was very connected. She was, before dying, she said, she was sick, and she said, "Take me to the forest. I want to say goodbye to the forest."
Oh, wow. Oh,
So
that's another poem.
that's another poem. Yeah.
Your work is cut
I'll
out.
have to be busy for a while.
Well, that's good. That's the best kind of busy to be.
It is.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Mm. Mhm. And of course now scientists are catching up with the poets and the mystics, and actually proving that trees communicate with each other through this underground network of mycelium. They send messages, um, and that they are sentient. And that I think is the crucial factor. Another aspect of the story of separation is that humans alone possess consciousness. Nothing else does. It's all just programming and instinct and so on. But we're starting to see like that's not true. And these poems, help us. There's a way in which poems can embody that truth that is richer than any, prose statement would be about it. And so these poems, again, they help us remember what we've forgotten. They help us remember who we truly are. They help us feel into that state of non-separation. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's unless somebody else has a comment they want to share? I was thinking we could move on. Oh, here we go. Yeah. Sasha.
Yeah, just quickly. This line, because it's been what, 1,000,000 years. I love that because it's like that instead of just going straight to the tree, she's, the only thing I questioned, which sounds like a big letting go. And then we get it was a 40-hour work week, and how come the French and the Italians get in? And it's like, and so that line is this really interesting kind of flip, a kind of hinge.
Yeah.
It's because it's been what, 1,000,000 years since I've had a vacation, it's outrage, but because it's been what, 1,000,000 years that the systemic crap has been going on, or whatever. But
Right.
it's because it's been 1,000,000 years since we sat down and talked, the tree.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I love that switch. It's kind of like, it kind of gave me a chortle, like that first line about the hard edges of the book.
Yeah.
But the book sang her to sleep.
Yeah.
I just love the quick switch.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That line has always kind of puzzled me a little bit. I've loved it without really understanding it, but everything you said about it makes total sense. That it's been 1,000,000 years since we talked. It's been 1,000,000 years since I've had a vacation. And was there a third way you had of reading that line, or was it mainly those two?
1,000,000 years since this systemic nonsense, oppression of the worker, or whatever. It seems like, it's just like how easy it is to get on that train of outrage.
Right.
Maybe justified.
Yeah. And feeling, worn down by that. But there's a kind of, I don't know, sort of charming grouchiness that she's expressing there that is winning. The voice of the poem is so casual and relaxed that we feel like, oh, this poet is just talking to us. It's wonderful. Yeah, she's quite a good poet, an African American poet, and this poem is also in the new anthology. Yeah, she's quite good. Yeah, great, thank you. All right, let's do. Oh, sorry.
Could I just quickly add? I think it might have already been mentioned, but there was another kind of additional for me, because it's been what, 1,000,000 years? Yet somehow that maple knew me.
Yeah.
And so even though I may have lost touch with or forgotten, there's this suggestion or sense that for all these years, that maple knew me.
Yeah.
And now we're meeting up again. Kind of, it's been waiting very patiently.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. That's just a great insight. I always learn so much when I teach these poems because, the collective intelligence of the group is greater than any single intelligence. But I always come away feeling a deeper appreciation and understanding of the poem. But yeah, it's she's forgotten all the treeness, but the tree hasn't forgotten. It's been 1,000,000 years. But that tree has not given up on the connection. Yeah, thank you. That's such a great insight. Yeah, wonderful. But wait, there was another hand up.
Sorry, it was me, but I just wanted to say that I don't know if in Italy we still have 8 weeks of vacation. It's more half of that, but yeah.
It's more what?
Half of that. 4 weeks.
Really?
4 weeks is good.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but that is a funny kind of resentment. The French and the Italians, why do they get so much? Yeah. But I still can't pronounce your name. Chalam. It seemed like you wanted to speak.
No, I'm happy.
Oh, you're happy. Okay, wonderful. All right, let's do the Rilke poem. This is from Sonnets to Orpheus, and it's also in the new anthology. See the flowers. See the flowers, so faithful to earth. We know their fate because we share it. Were they to grieve for their wilting, that grief would be ours to feel. There's a lightness in things. Only we move forever burdened, pressing ourselves into everything, obsessed by weight. How strange and devouring our ways must seem to those for whom life is enough. If you could enter their dreaming and dream with them deeply, you would come back different to a different day, moving so easily from that common depth. Or maybe just stay there. They would bloom and welcome you, all those brothers and sisters tossing in the meadows, and you would be one of them. I love the way these poems, kind of circle around each other and pick up on the same themes. But yeah, what do you like about this poem? What especially speaks to you? Yes. Remind me again how to pronounce your name.
It's actually Hebrew, and so the CH is kind of gargled. So
Okay.
it's Chalem.
Oh, okay. You're not making it easier. Kalam.
Well, again, I'm these poems are really bringing me back to my partner who died in 2013. And if you could enter their dreaming and dream with them deeply, you would come back different to a different day, moving so easily from that common depth. When she was close to dying, but still mobile, I would sit in the kitchen and watch Monica say goodbye to her favorite tree in our yard.
Oh, wow.
And I would watch how she so deeply gazed into the throat of a flower, as though she were really going on a journey into the deep beauty of the flower. And it kept pulling her in deeper and deeper.
Wow.
And so this reminds me so much of the real beauty that she revealed to me as she was dying.
Yeah.
Living and dying.
Yeah. Wow, what an incredible gift.
Yeah.
I mean, that she could do that, and that you got to witness it and be part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just really beautiful and moving. Yeah, so appreciate you. The vulnerability to share that with the group is really important. And yeah, thank you. Yeah, these poems speak to the deepest aspects of our shared human experience. That they tell us the truth about who we really are, and that way of connecting or seeing our oneness. If you could enter their dreaming and dream with them deeply, I mean, that's just trippy, right? To think that the flowers are dreaming, and that you could enter their dreaming and dream with them deeply, and that you would be transformed by that, moving so easily from that common depth where there is no separation. It's just, I mean, Rilke's just incredible. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, this poem just shows us what a mystic Rilke had been. amazing. It's so loaded. For me, the first thing that struck me was we know their fate because we share it. I mean, it's such a beautiful way to say the obvious that the whole humanity is trying to avoid facing. We're so invested in denying death,
Yeah.
wilting and death.
Yeah.
So beautifully said. So that was great. And then the second one was how strange and devouring our ways must seem to those for whom life is enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great said. Well, fantastic.
Yeah. That kind of says it all.
Yeah, it
Oh.
says it all.
How strange and devouring our ways must seem to those for whom life is enough. You know, our grasping and aversion are the ways we're literally devouring the earth. And you know, there's not anger in those lines. It's just how strange and devouring our ways must seem to those for whom life itself is enough. Yeah, yeah, and Rilke, the mystical dimension of his work is so profound. Yeah, and as you say, you know, what a wonderful way to point to impermanence. You know, were they to grieve for their wilting, their grief would be ours to feel. We know their fate because we share it. You know.
Yeah, so simple, few
Yeah.
words, and then it just says it all. Fantastic.
Yeah. Simple and profound. Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah. What else? Yeah, Carrie.
There's some really beautiful sort of promises of belonging, but they're kind of conditional statements. So if you could do this, you would come back different. They would bloom and welcome you, and you would be one of them. And just that it's reassuring, comforting. You wouldn't be taking that step in vain. There's something to be gained from risk taking or reaching out.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know, the conditional aspect of that is similar to the other poems. You know, my God, I could bud, even blossom. I could bud, even blossom. Or if I stepped out of my body, I would break into blossom. You know, and it's just striking me now that there's a kind of humility in that. You know, rather than announcing, you know, I have awoken. You know, I have gone beyond. Um, but just recognizing that that's a real possibility, that it's there. If you could enter their dreaming and dream with them deeply, you would come back different to a different day, moving so easily from that common depth. Or maybe just stay there. They would bloom and welcome you, all those brothers and sisters tossing in the meadows. I love that, tossing in the meadows. And you would be one of them. Brothers and sisters. You know, for millions of years, we had a kinship relationship with nature. And only in the, you know, in the modern era has it been it's become a master-slave relationship where, you know, we treat nature like it's just there to serve us, you know, and the consequences of that are, you know, all around us, plain as day. But yeah, I love this. I love that it helps us to remember that that's possible, that these beings are our brothers and sisters. And if we really saw the world that way, we wouldn't be tempted to, you know, destroy it. You know, you wouldn't kill your brother and your sister. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I find these poems just so, I mean, they're teaching poems, but they're just so beautiful, and the way they do what they do. Um, yeah, Andrea.
Um, yes, I really like the line, to those for whom life is enough. And I feel like a quality of Becker, of acceptance, of equanimity. And I think that it reminds us that there is the possibility to find some beings that live like that. And we experience maybe acceptance and serenity from time to time, and we are caught in our works. But looking at the flower, knowing that he is right now experiencing that state, I think that could be a reminder for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good way of thinking about these poems as reminders. And in a way as being exemplary. They give us examples of states of heightened awareness or deepened connection, or however you want to, it's hard to describe, but they show us that it's possible. As you say, like Rilke shows us that he has felt this very deeply. And if he can feel it, we can all feel it. We're all equipped with the same human capacities. And I think, seeing the poem as a reminder, as an example of ways that we can cultivate our relationships with the world of nature and non-human others, is really helpful. It's really, really helpful and healing in a way. It can help us to heal the wound of separation that we all feel, even if we're not conscious of it. Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Mm, mm,
Just if I could add,
yeah,
for me, there's also a lovely promise or offering in the last three lines, in being welcomed, that all those brothers and sisters, all of us humans, brothers and sisters, if we could see as the flowers are each other tossing and moving so beautifully, gracefully in the meadow, and really experience that each of us is one of us, one of them.
yeah,
As the flowers, that we could see the beauty of each of us.
yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's just such a wonderful offering. Or
yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to describe it, right? I mean, Rilke, says it beautifully, but yeah, that sense of the boundary just being dissolved, or just recognizing that these boundaries are illusory, they're not real, that there is no separation ultimately in the relative world that we live in. We have to go along with these illusions, but underneath that, we see, and these poems help us see that, those barriers, those boundaries are permeable, and illusory. And yeah, like I said, I think that can be really, really healing. Yeah, yeah. Mm. Well, we have 8 minutes left. We could use that time to talk about another poem, or we could have a Q&A, a short Q&A. I have a feeling that the momentum is towards doing another poem. I guess I'll make an executive decision about that and hope that it's okay. And I can stay late if there are questions, unless I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, if somebody would really rather do a Q&A, you could say that, and I'm happy to change course. But because we don't have a lot of time left, I thought maybe we could do, I want to do all these. I love all these poems so much. It's hard to skip any. But I think this William Stafford poem, I know we did a Stafford poem last time. It's All Right, that people really enjoyed. So this is one of my favorite William Stafford poems. I'm sorry, I forgot to put his name on this. but it's the last poem that I sent to you. Yep, that's it. Ask me, sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Others have come in their slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or to hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. I will listen to what you say. You and I can turn and look at the silent river and wait. We know the current is there, hidden, and there are comings and goings from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. What the river says, that is what I say. Yeah, so again, just simply what feels especially alive in this poem for you, feels resonant. And we just, have a time for a few responses. But I think it would be, just nice to hear how you relate to this poem.
I I think the idea that we're more than our actions in this life.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really profound, very simply stated. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. And again, he's pointing to like our true nature. Our true nature is unaffected by, the events of our lives. It is beyond the changing conditions. But I love the way he says it. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. No, it's deeper than that. Yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in this poem, I feel. Yeah.
I love the way the poem, the first line and the last line.
Yeah.
What the river says, that is what I say.
Yeah.
Sometime when the river is ice, ask me then
Yeah.
mistakes I have made.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's great. Yeah. I love that ending. There's a video.
And
Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
No, you go. No.
Well, I was just thinking in parentheses, and when the ice melts, all of that goes away. The river will go on.
Yeah. 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 But it is interesting that it's like sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Like why put it in the future, or why is the iced over river important? I find that kind of mysterious. But then in the second stanza he says, you and I can turn and look at the silent river and wade. We know the current is there hidden. We know the current is there hidden, and there are comings and goings from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. And again, it's sort of seen like underneath the surface is ice, or the surface of my life is what I have done, but there's something deeper than that we know is there, even though we can't see it. Yeah, I think that's just really beautiful and powerful. And, comings and goings, causes and conditions from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. It's incredible.
And
Yeah.
I think you're saying this already, John, but I also hear sometime when the river is ice, those moments in our lives where we really get frozen or locked into
Right.
judging ourselves, criticizing the mistakes I've made.
Yeah.
So when the river takes a pause, seemingly on the surface, when it's frozen, then I will also reveal my capacity to freeze and ask. I will speak of the mistakes I have made, kind of knowing and maybe hoping or trusting that when the ice melts and underneath the current, it's still flowing. All of that will still
Yeah. flow. Yeah. The life force will go on. It can't be stopped. Yeah. I mean, there's such richness there. It's hard to unpack it all, but I love what you're pointing to there. I think that makes a lot of sense and helps me to, kind of understand the poem in a different way. Yeah. Others have come in their slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. Again, there's something deeper that is unaffected by changing conditions, by love or praise or blame, loss and gain, the 8 vicissitudes. Like, awareness is completely unaffected by that deep, pure being that knows we're not separate. Nothing can harm it. Nothing can rankle it. There's no disturbance. Yeah. Krishnamurti said one time, he, toward the end of his life, he was speaking to a group and he paused suddenly and said, he kind of almost whispered, he said, "Do you want to know my secret?" And of course, everyone was like, "Oh my God, the great teacher is going to give us the ultimate, wisdom." And Krishnamurti said, "I don't mind what happens." I don't mind what happens. Which is just, I think, a very profound teaching about, like, yeah, my true nature is unaffected by what happens. And that's who I am. So anyway, it's exactly our stopping time. So I don't like to go over in these meetings, although I wish we could talk more. I do teach a online poetry, a spiritual practice, like once a month, and this is what we do. I give a talk, and then we do a longer meditation. Then we talk about poems in this way, so if you're interested in that, maybe you could let me know through Chloe. Feel free to give out my email address. And my wife and I are also doing a retreat, which incorporates the practice that we did today in August, just outside of Portland, Oregon. And there's still some spots available in both those offerings. So if you're interested, please let me know, and I'll send on more details about that. But thank you so much. This was just really rich, and I felt no separation between myself and you during our time together. So that's a wonderful thing. Yeah.